everything is about fundamentals first, right? Whatever you're doing with your career, fundamentals don't change that fast. Of course, there are new ideas and new things we want to implement for our use cases, but overall, things don't change that fast. We chase really complex systems. Often, it's resume-driven development. You're trying all this cool stuff, so systems become less reliable. And that's a real danger that I see with the whole Gen AI hype. We are building very complex systems which are less reliable, and we are going to lose money because of that in the future.
And now what really changes the model? We used to have, like an NLP pre-trained model, and now let's say we have an API call or maybe even a local LLM. What do you see is now different? What's going on?
That evaluation is pretty much gone. The piece.
Oh my God, no.
Yeah, well, before we were actually evaluating how good these models were, and now it's based on the gut feeling. It's hard, yeah. But I think you always need to follow your curiosity, because there are so many things out there and we only know so little. And the more you know, the more you understand how much you don't know. But I think in general, you need to focus on doing things simple first. And that's what you see also in all these documents shared by Google, Microsoft on how to build reliable systems. Just start simple.
For some people who don't know you so far, can you please introduce yourself? What have you been up to in the last year and what kind of projects are coming towards 2025? I heard there's a lot of interesting stuff.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me, Serop. I'm Maria. I'm in data and AI field already for 11 years. I started as a data analyst and moved into data science and then into machine learning engineering when no one put models in production for me. So I had to figure it all out by myself, and then moved more towards MLOps just to standardize all the processes I was busy with. And it's super fun. That's the part I really like the most. And that's something that I like sharing knowledge on. And well, I created courses together with my colleague Bashak. We worked together on Marvelous MLOps and also writing a book on MLOps with Databricks. That's technology that I'm using a lot for the last 3.5 years. And it makes a lot of sense just to go on with the technology you are most familiar with, because everything changes so fast. It's crazy.
I totally agree. And it's really overwhelming staying up with all the technologies and all the tools. I remember when the whole MLOps was also like a hype, if you remember a couple of years ago. I feel a little bit nostalgic now when I see the new Gen AI tools. Because I remember when I joined, I'm also like a data scientist. When I joined the Switch, when I wanted to be like an MLOps engineer, I remember people were posting these like, oh, if you want to become an MLOps engineer, these are the tools that you need to learn. And there was like, for every step in the MLOps process, there was like a different tool. And now somebody posted a very similar one for Gen AI. And I'm like, oh my God, this is happening again. I have to learn all these things now. But I like a statement that you wrote on your LinkedIn that says MLOps is about fundamentals, but not about tools, which brings me hope that I don't have to learn all these kind of stuff. But what do you mean by that when you wrote this?
Well, I think everything is about fundamentals first, right? Whatever you're doing with your career, fundamentals don't change that fast. Of course, there are new ideas and new things we want to implement for our use cases, but overall, things don't change that fast. You still need to get some data from somewhere. You need to still pre-process it, make sure the quality is good. You still need to train your models, make sure that you track everything, that the code is tracked, that the data is tracked, what model artifact was produced and how it was used after, and how the data, the output of the models was delivered to the end user. And there are standard ways that also don't really change. It's either API or some SFTP transfer, something like that, or writing to a database. It just doesn't change. All these things are the same. And with the Gen AI, you have extra components. You have maybe vector database. You have some system to track your prompts. You also have some tools to optimize your prompts for the targets you are trying to achieve. All these things that you're also not going to change. It's all the same thing all over again. And well, it gets more complicated because there are more tools now, but overall, the principles never change.
The principles never change. That's at least give us hope, because the things are getting so out of hand so quickly and it's evolving so much. Like over the Christmas, I had a little break of LinkedIn, and I have to say, like, it was the best thing ever. Like, not to look at every updates every 2 weeks, like something happened or somebody say like we're gonna lose our jobs or whatever. So it's good. It's good to stick to the fundamentals. Maybe you can enlighten us, like what kind of main fundamentals you're referring to. Like you already mentioned, like the data parts, the like let's say somebody want to be a good MLOps engineer or now a Gen AI engineer or AI engineer. Are there specific fundamentals that they should live by?
For sure. I think overall traceability and reproducibility, these are the biggest pieces that I mentioned. And reliability, and that's something that is often forgotten because we chase really complex systems. Often this resume-driven development, you're trying all this cool stuff, which are not necessarily better, maybe slightly better, but much harder to maintain. So systems become less reliable. And that's a real danger that I see with the whole Gen AI hype. We are building very complex systems which are less reliable, and we are going to lose money because of that in the future. In the end, for me, it's often not worth it. You really need to be very pragmatic about all these things. And another thing that you want to try not to reinvent the wheel, and that's also one of the biggest things in MLOps. If you look in large organizations, most of the processes are the same. So you don't want each of the teams try to build their own system while most of the components can be reused. And that's one of the things that MLOps engineers mainly are busy with. So for example, if you want to start a new project, what is the process of creating a repository in a standardized way with all the permissions granted for all the systems you need to a certain group of people? And if you add new people or remove people, how do you make sure that these permissions are also adjusted accordingly? This has to do a lot with cloud engineering in general and security practices that we see there. Yeah, that's an interesting field that is really overlapping with all others that I see out there.
I totally agree with you. We had the situation about a month ago where the configurations weren't set up in a proper way, that when somebody left who had control of all over these permissions, it was so hard to give these permissions to somebody else. Everything was somehow bootstrapped, and we had to like bring down the cluster and inject the new ID, and like things could get really messy, especially if you have something in production. You cannot have downtime. You cannot, especially if you're getting so many requests per day. And I feel like there's so many things that you need to be careful about and build, especially in big organizations. Maybe if you're a startup, it's okay to build something quick and don't really focus on the long-term vision. But for big corporates who are having like millions of requests per week, you need to really focus on the reliability. And I really like that you mentioned reliability, because I feel like nowadays everybody's doing some really cool stuff. Like there's some really, really interesting stuff. Maybe make a really nice demo with Gen AI or whatever, mainly like chatbots. But I still haven't heard of a lot of really successful use cases of maybe, let's say, chatbots that are really in production, that hasn't caused some sort of unauthorized access or hasn't caused some problems. I heard the other day, yesterday, somebody talked to me that like some banks are using already chatbots in Germany, which was very interesting to hear. And I'm like, okay, like these are the industries where like it's scary to have a chatbot that has access to financial data or whatever these people are asking for. But I guess if you build it right and you put the right security on top of it and stuff like this and the right permissions, maybe it does make sense. It definitely adds a lot of complexity. Do you see this complexity like different, like with maybe LLM Ops than normal MLOps? Like what layer of complexity is it adding?
For sure. I think we have more components just to start with, right? Usually it's third-party API that you are accessing, and you just depend on it. And often there are not clear SLAs. If I was working for a bank, I wouldn't be pushing for a chatbot like that. It is really dangerous. But what I see across the industries, in Europe at least, is that in general, organizations are cautious. And if there are some applications that are there in production, they're usually internal facing. The ones that I see a lot, which was first surprising to me, is classification tasks. So especially when you're going into chat with human agents, there are some text classification tasks just to point it to the right agent. These use cases were there always pretty much. When I worked in telecom, it was one of the big use cases because it was a hard thing to do. to route to the right agent, to also summarize what the agent was doing for the next agent to be able to read it, and also to monitor what kind of things are coming up for the people that are interacting with the agents. And these use cases are amazing for LLMs, I think, but we really need to go back to the basics. And when we are talking about classification, we have some ways to assess how good the models are. And these are exactly the same ways how we need to deal with it when we are going into LLMs. Nothing has changed, but people approach it differently, though, for some reason. I don't know why. Maybe because these are software engineers that are calling those APIs and they just don't think about optimizing the prompts.
Interesting. What do you see is different? So let's maybe remind people. So in traditional classification task, you have usually labeled data set, you have like some accuracy, you have a test data set, all this kind of stuff. And now what really changes the model? We used to have, I don't know, like an NLP pre-trained model. And now let's say we have an API call or maybe even a local LLM. But what do you see is now different? What's going on?
That evaluation is pretty much gone. The piece.
Oh my God, no.
Well, before we were actually evaluating how good these models were, and now it's based on the gut feeling. That's what I've seen, at least, and that makes me sad. And the reason why it happens, because it gets in the hand of software engineers that just, treat it as another API call, and that's it. And that really surprises me.
I wonder why. Do you think because I feel like since everybody now has ChatGPT, like let's say, and worked around with it, and some people got really, really impressed. And I have the feeling that now people, like most people now judge it as like, oh, this is the ultimate truth. And especially if you like have a classification task or something and it's generating some good results, people just like forgot that, oh no, it could actually mislabel stuff. It could make some mistakes. It could do some stuff.
They probably treat it as a human, I guess, in some certain ways, because previously, human agents were judging whether it was a good output or not, or some human in the loop. And we are talking a lot about the importance of human in the loop, but you also see LLM as a judge, and maybe that's a misunderstanding that we see in the industry. I'm not saying everyone is doing it that way. There are really good use cases. People who do it understand what they're doing, but I've also seen that some don't, and that's a dangerous part that we haven't seen before.
That's so interesting. You're so right. Because LLM as a judge has now emerged as like the gold standard for evaluating LLMs. I mean, maybe it makes sense if you're generating content and you don't have like labeled data set, but don't use it for everything, Like if you have like good labeled data set done by humans, or you've been collecting from your business for years, don't just add LLM as on top of it. Well, how would you approach, like, there's now a lot of applications with image generation. And like, let's say you have like an AI image generated and you want to see if it has like 7 fingers or like something crazy. What I saw people are doing is they put also another LLM asking, oh, does this image has any weird artifacts? And I saw in the image, it did have 7 fingers. And the LLM said like, no, it looks like a perfect human. I'm like, okay, well, this is not bringing us anywhere.
No.
Do you have any solution for such a problem?
That's an interesting problem indeed. I think it's one of the hardest problems, really, right? Because LLMs are trained on a certain data, and what we put in it, that's what you get back, and they're learning from some kind of patterns. So I've seen also on LinkedIn, it was interesting. If you ask to make a picture of a evil hedgehog, or a hedgehog that can really be very fast, they come up with Sonic and the rival of Sonic, like literally the picture of it. It's interesting. LLMs, foundation models in general, they're not really original in that, as we may think, they are really creative. They don't recognize that maybe as a problem, 7 fingers. Maybe you can show a lot of examples of things that go wrong. And maybe another thing that I've seen also on LinkedIn, you just point out there is a mistake, find the mistake in the picture. And then it says, that's a mistake. And then you ask, are you sure? And if it's not sure, then it's not very confident about it. So that's might be an indication that you need a human in the loop or something to actually check it for sure. So there are a lot of interesting approaches, I think, how to go about it.
Interesting. So you ask it, are you sure about this? And if it's not sure, you send it to a human to check.
Yeah, for example. But I think it all must be really tested well. We should approach it as experiment. Just as data scientists usually approach their work, it's not any different from that, I feel. It's really not much different from any, text-based models that we had in the past, that I also worked with in the past. Now we go much further than just text, of course. It can deal with different types of context, not just text. And it makes it maybe not that obvious for people how to deal with it.
Yeah, I can totally relate. Obviously, everybody want to work with them. Everybody want to get experience with them because nowadays it seems to be one of like the main areas where like fundings are, job titles are, like you need to be an AI engineer. And it seems on surface a very easy barrier to entry. Like it seems like, okay, I can send queries to ChatGPT, then I am qualified. I guess once you enter the market, you realize like maybe the first 2 months you connect the system, it works, and then it's doing crazy stuff. And then you have to really explain to people why this very unpredictable model is doing some crazy stuff that's not your fault, which I guess it was a problem also with machine learning. I remember even back then, still till now, we have a recommender system that recommend different products for people. And we get always asked the same questions, like, why are we getting these recommendations? And that was like always like a problem for data scientists to explain. It was like, well, I don't know. It's there are some indicators this customer is similar to these other customers, stuff like this. But now I feel like it's getting way worse because there's also little deterministic output. There's generation. It's fun to work with, but I don't know.
Yeah, some people claim it got easier because you can ask it why, and then it will explain in human understandable language. But how correct that is another problem, of course.
Yeah, but it's evolving in a very good pace. I feel like the models of today is the worst model you've interacted with, probably like looking at the future, which is providing like a good opportunity as well to solve so many problems. But yeah, it's definitely like we always keep telling people like focus on fundamentals, having stuff observable, reproducible. So experiment tracking, as you mentioned. Actually, I've done a lot of courses online and I still haven't seen a good course. I still haven't taken yours. I saw the content seems very, very interesting because usually every time I did a course, let's say Google Cloud, do like an MLOps or machine learning, they try to push their services. It's not really about like fundamentals. It's about, oh, how do you use BigQuery? How do you use blah, blah, blah. But then, I mean, it seems to be as you said, the fundamentals are very stable throughout what? When did MLOps come out? Maybe 5 years ago that we started hearing about MLOps?
Yeah, around 2020 indeed, I think so.
Yeah. So ever since people decided like we need to take away some fundamentals, some concepts of DevOps to make machine learning more accessible. Because if you remember back then, it was like Jupyter Notebook, and then you put it in production, and
it's still like that, unfortunately.
Oh no! Yeah, I hope people are a little bit moving away from that, realize the dangers of this. But if you remember, this was the current status quo, and people were getting a lot of money just to do like a Jupyter Notebook, like scratch something and show some fancy dashboards. And then we said like, okay, this is not good enough. Like we need GitLab, GitHub. We need that the code be versionable. We need reverting. We need so many different things. Maybe you can tell us like, what did you come up with in your course that was really the essentials to have an end-to-end MLOps basically product?
Well, we start with fundamentals. We explain what MLOps is about, what different pieces, what different components are there on MLOps. Our course is focusing on specific technology, Databricks. But the main reason why is because you need to have some tool to explain that in the first place. You can't explain it without the tools. But we really tie pieces together. We show how to start maybe with a notebook. Unfortunately, some of the functionality doesn't work in VS Code. Like feature engineering packages, for example, unfortunately just don't work in the VS Code. And that's one of the limitations that you have of DB Connect. Well, we would love to do everything in VS Code. We would love to do everything in dev containers, but that's an unfortunate piece that it's not always possible. But we show the best approach to it. And that's what I see a lot, that all the courses are notebook-centric, and we try to show how to do that without notebooks, or if you still have to use notebooks, how you go about it. And I think Databricks has another challenge is reproducibility of environment. So if you look on Databricks in general, in a notebook or in a job, you have a Databricks environment, and you can't reproduce that environment locally. It's impossible. You can get as close to that environment as you can, but it's never the same thing. So, for example, if you use a classic compute, if you use a classic cluster runtime 15.4, it comes up with a pre-installed Python libraries and a very certain Python version. It runs on Ubuntu, and if you are on a MacBook or if you are on a Windows machine, if you try to install all the same versions of the libraries, it's gonna fail because you are not on Ubuntu. But okay, let's say you are going to make a Docker image and then install it there. Even that is not the same thing, because Databricks, if you initialize a cluster from that Docker image, it will install other things on top of that. And you will never get exactly the same thing. And that's a bit frustrating, but that's the reality we live in, I think. And you just need to be aware of that. And that's what most people are not aware of, I feel, and how to go about it and make it as close to reproducible thing as possible. So that's what we also teach about. Also, we take the project, the real project, and we let other people choose their own data sets and repeat the steps we do on their own data sets. And I think that's approach that really helps people dive into the concepts and understand all these concepts much better, and maybe dive into their own challenges with a data set that we haven't faced on our data set. And we cover all important concepts that come with MLOps. So we talk about CI/CD pipelines, we talk about version control, packaging your code, how to deploy things on Databricks using asset bundles, how to deploy endpoints, what different types of endpoints are there, what are the limitations of those approaches, how to deal with Unity catalog and monitoring. It really, really goes deep, and I haven't seen such a course anywhere else, and that's why we made it.
Nice. I'm so happy that you did this, because it was one of the main struggles of my career, especially for people who want to switch from data science to a more an engineering role. It's basically you need to learn DevOps in machine learning. I feel like it's basically DevOps with some data knowledge, because you need to, if this is like the standard, but managing Kubernetes cluster, at least for our company, like it's kind of a must. Like you're the one responsible for the Kubernetes cluster. You're the one responsible for the infrastructure. So managing with Terraform, with infrastructure as code, that was something that was a little bit shocking to me. And it was like, oh, I really need to know all of this. But at least, as you said, most of the courses I saw was always focused on like, okay, gather the data, train the model, and then that's it. They stop. And I'm really pleased that you mentioned deployments, endpoints. I remember the first time I heard about an endpoint was maybe 3-4 years ago. And I was like, what is an endpoint? How can you make one? And how can you receive an API call? And also monitoring. And it's a very interesting space to learn things from, but also very challenging, because I feel still the only way to learn is to build things and load testing. And I'm like, oh my God, like, yes, like I would love to know how to load test an API and see when does it break or how much resources it can take. I'm really happy that there's people like you putting these kind of information, because it saves us so much more time if you like join a course and then kind of you learn, or at least build a good basis, rather than try to build it on the job with the stress of your stakeholders telling you the site is down or something like this.
Yeah, and you need to have luck as well to have good mentors on your workspace. Not many people have it, I feel. And that's also one of the things that we try to do. So we have 2 courses, maybe just to clarify. There is one on LinkedIn Learning. That's more a basic course that doesn't go that deep, but it covers end-to-end process more or less. And we have Maven course together with Bashak that's done by Marvelous MLOps. And that's where we go really deep, and it's a cohort-based course, so we give live lectures every week. And we go really, really deep on all these things. We've felt that pain ourselves, and that's basically the result of it, because we struggled. We really struggled through all these processes, figuring out the right way of doing things. And we've seen our students grow a lot from this course. And I think that's a very rewarding piece of seeing how you can help others in their career. That's what I really love about teaching.
Oh, that's so sweet of you. That's really nice. I could also say like me putting this podcast is also part of trying to give a little bit to students, help them navigate struggles that made me lose some brain cells, so they don't have to fall into the same thing. But I really like that. I really like that people do stuff outside of their full-time job. I mean, you're a tech lead from what I understood, right?
Yes.
And just purely from this passion of teaching and community, I guess also makes you like put in the extra hours, maybe sacrifice some weekends, sacrifice some personal time to maybe help people. How was this journey for you so far? Like, what is the most fulfilling thing, as you just mentioned, but what was also very challenging?
Well, I think it is in general hard for people who are introvert by nature to start doing that in the first place, right? I'm an introvert person, even though some people think I'm not. I'm very introvert. It's just challenging just to start doing that in the first place. But I've been in the space for a very long time, and I don't see much people with my experience sharing their knowledge. So, and I felt like I need to start doing that because I see a lot of information that I don't really agree with from people with a lot of following. And I thought, well, it's just not fair, you know? I just need to share my own knowledge and experience. So that's how it started with. And started writing articles about that and creating LinkedIn content. And I met a lot of people on the way. There are so many amazing content creators out there, and it's really very supportive environment. We are all supporting each other, and it's just really, really amazing. So that's one of the best pieces of it, I think. Just meeting all these amazing people, that's awesome. And course creation is another milestone. It's a really hard thing to do. It is really hard because one thing is understanding it yourself, but second is just explaining it well. And it's so hard. It's really hard. But you learn a lot yourself doing that. By doing that, you understand the concepts even better. And that's also one of the reasons why I'm writing the book. I think in the course you can only give so much knowledge, but it's limited to the course. And in the book, I feel like you can dump all the stuff you know, and you even make it bigger. So yeah, really, really nice journey so far.
What's the book is about?
It's MLOps with Databricks. It's all the same topic, I think, that I'm busy with lately. Well, just because I worked with that technology for the last 3.5 years, and I bumped into all kind of problems you can imagine. So I feel like I really stretched it as far as I can. And that information is just nowhere. So we just need to put it all in one place. That's a feeling that I got from it. Yeah.
I wish they can do this for Google because we use Google Cloud for our main like cloud provider. And I mean, Google, as I said, they provide their own courses, but it's not really focused on the user, but more, I guess, on pushing their own products. Because I've done a lot of courses with them and now I stopped. I gave up. I'm a big fan of building stuff yourself and pushing the projects. And I do have to confess, using Gen AI like a sparring partner to exchange ideas, especially for new topics, has helped me so much to understand, especially if you're reading a weird documentation that is maybe not so clear. Asking ChatGPT or whatever other language model to clarify this statement or like ask more questions has been so useful to me. And I'm really happy that this technology now exists because I feel I can learn way, way quicker.
I agree. Yeah, I have
especially
the
for
same.
cloud. Yeah.
I have the same. Because I'm writing a book for O'Reilly, I have access to this O'Reilly learning platform. I used to have that in the past, but it finished. And now I have lifetime access. I think that's amazing. That's one of the best parts of being an author. So basically, I have access to all the books now, the learning materials and O'Reilly, and you can ask it questions. And it has more knowledge, I guess, than other things that don't have access to these O'Reilly documents. So materials. So I really, really like it. It's very nicely done feature there.
And did you reach out to O'Reilly, or how did it come that you decided to write a book with them?
Well, actually, I was thinking about that already for a long time. It's like on my bucket list of things to do, writing a book. I think everyone in my family wrote a book, so I just feel like I have to, I guess. Well, I come from a family of teachers. My both parents are PhD in math, and they wrote many, many books on things that I don't understand at all. So
that is so interesting.
Yeah, it is really fun. So it was always on my bucket list, and I think O'Reilly reached out to me to give a talk, and I did back then. And then I also said, well, I actually would like to write a book, and then conversation started. But I wasn't sure back then what I was willing to do. And this autumn, it became crystal clear that's the book I want to write, and I really want to do it now. And that's how it all started.
Wow. Is there a timeline when the book might come out?
Yeah, so it's planned for January 2026 to come out, but I think there will be early release somewhere, maybe in June. I don't know for sure those details, but that's how it typically goes.
Well, I'm really looking forward to get a copy and read some really good, high quality content, especially in this space. Because nowadays, we get a lot of noise, especially on LinkedIn. People are really dying for like knowing exactly what works and what doesn't. And I can only like empathize with students or fresh grads because I'm struggling. Like, I don't know how these guys are navigating this whole thing and knowing what to learn and what not to learn and what to invest your time in and what not to invest your time in and what actually works, what doesn't.
It's hard, yeah. But I think you always need to follow your curiosity because there are so many things out there and we only know so little. And the more you know, the more you understand how much you don't know. I think that's the hardest thing in learning in general. So yeah, the only way is, I think, to follow your passion, whatever you feel like that's your thing to learn, and to help other people maybe to learn as well.
That's so sweet. All right, then. Thank you so much, Maria, for this very nice chat. We've learned a lot, and at least you gave us some hope that there's still somewhere that we're not all lost and we don't need to learn all these stuff, at least learn the right things. I think the advice has been mutual on main people who have been over a decade. I mean, like yourself, in the industry, is like things don't change that rapidly. The problems are still the same. There's like new ways to solve them, but don't focus all your energy on these new fancy tools and just focus on like learning the right things. Focus on building stuff that are valuable. Like, don't just make a chatbot for the sake of a chatbot. Like, if it makes sense, do it. If it doesn't, make a button. I don't know.
Make a button. Yeah. No, but I think in general, you need to focus on doing things simple first, right? And that's what you see also in all these documents shared by Google, Microsoft on how to build reliable systems. Just start simple. That's what you need to do. And maybe there is no machine learning involved at all. No AI, just a button. That's also fine.
That's also fine. Yeah, don't be discouraged if that's what people want. Just do that for them. All right, Maria, thank you so much for your time and wish you all the best in your career and looking forward to reading your new book. I wish you a great day.
Have a great day.